At 6:42 a.m., my phone buzzed on the kitchen table. Not rang, buzzed. That soft, insistent vibration that feels almost polite, like it's apologizing for interrupting your morning. I was standing at the counter waiting for the coffee to finish dripping. The old Mr. Coffee machine hissed and clicked like it always did, burning that last inch of coffee I hadn't poured yet. The AM radio murmured a farm report out of Cedar Rapids. Corn prices, river levels, the kind of news that keeps moving whether your life does or not. Outside, the maple tree by the driveway shook in the wind, leaves skittering across the concrete like they were late for something. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and glanced at the screen. Linda. Plans changed. You're not coming on the cruise. Emily wants her real dad. That was it. No explanation, no greeting, no punctuation at the end, like she hadn't even bothered to close the thought. By noon, my marriage was already over. I stood there staring at the screen like it might blink and apologize. Like maybe another message would come through saying, I didn't mean it that way, or we need to talk, or this came out wrong. Nothing did. The phone buzzed again on the table, trying to claw its way through the wood. I didn't pick it up. I set it face down instead and watched it vibrate uselessly. I pulled out the chair at the head of the table and sat down. That chair had always been mine. Not because I demanded it, but because over the years it just became my spot. The one that faced the window. The one Linda used to joke about. Your chair, she'd say, smiling, like it was a small, harmless thing. The coffee finished dripping. The pot clicked off. The silence after felt louder than the machine ever had. 14 years earlier, I'd moved into this house on East Locust Street in Davenport with a couch, a toolbox, and a promise I meant. Emily was 12 then, skinny kid, braces coming, always watching more than she spoke. Her real father, Rick Donnelly, had already been mostly gone by then. Birthdays missed, school events forgotten, promises made and quietly abandoned. Linda told me that the first night we sat on the back steps together, beer bottles sweating in our hands, summer air thick with cicadas. It's just us, she'd said. We're a family now. She said family the way people say home, like it was a destination instead of something you build. And I believed her. I believed her when I paid for Emily's braces and Linda squeezed my arm and said, your money is our money. I believed her when I dipped into my savings for Emily's used Honda after she got into Iowa State, and Linda said, this is what dads do. I believed her when I set up the auto debit for the Mississippi River cruise, our anniversary trip, and Linda kissed my cheek and said, we deserve this. We. But the text didn't say we. It said, my real dad. The phone buzzed again. This time it was a voicemail notification. I already knew it was Linda before I hit play. Mark, her voice said, tight and fast, already annoyed. Don't make this into a thing. Emily just asked for this. You understand, right? Call me when you've calmed down. Calmed down. I leaned my hip against the counter and closed my eyes. I saw Emily at 12 sitting at the same table, math homework spread out, crying because Rick hadn't shown up again. I remembered pulling out the chair next to her, not the head chair, and saying, all right, kiddo, let's do this together. She'd smiled then, crooked, relieved, like she'd been holding her breath. I played the voicemail again. Linda's voice sounded practiced the second time, like she'd said it in her head before calling. I didn't call back. By 9:30, I was supposed to be on the road to Dubuque for a dealership visit. I put on my jacket, grabbed my keys, and paused in the hallway where the family photos hung. There was one from the year we refinanced. Linda and Emily were on the couch, me standing just off to the side, hand on the back cushion, like I wasn't sure I belonged in the frame. I'd never noticed that before. At the dealership, I shook hands, talked numbers, nodded at the right times. I missed a question and had to ask them to repeat it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. On the drive back, I pulled into a Casey's, sat in the truck with the engine idling, and listened to the phone ring until it stopped. The silence afterward felt heavy, like a door closing somewhere I couldn't reach. I thought about calling my buddy Tom from the VFW. I thought about calling my sister in Moline. I thought about calling Rick Donnelly and asking him what the hell he thought he was doing, stepping back into my life like a guest who finally noticed the bill. Instead, I drove home. The house was too quiet. Linda had already left for the airport. The bed was made tight and flat like a hotel room you're checking out of. I sat at the table again in the head chair and looked at the empty place settings. I imagined Linda and Emily on the cruise deck, wind in their hair, Rick leaning on the railing like he'd earned the view. My phone buzzed one more time. This time it was Emily. Please respect our space. I stared at the words until the letters blurred. I didn't throw the phone. I didn't swear. I just turned it face down and pushed it a few inches away, like you do with something hot you don't want to touch anymore. The AM radio clicked to the news. A story about river levels, about boats, about departures and returns. I sat there longer than I meant to, breathing, letting the hurt settle into something heavier and steadier. That was the moment it stopped being about the cruise. That was the moment I understood this wasn't a misunderstanding or a bad morning. It was a line being drawn, one they'd been inching toward for years while I paid the bills and smiled for photos. I didn't sleep much that night, not the tossing and turning kind, just the kind where your eyes are closed but your mind keeps walking in circles. At 5:30 a.m., I gave up. I shaved. I dressed. I made coffee again. This time I drank it standing up. The house felt different in the early light, like it was waiting for instructions. On the drive to work, the radio faded in and out between stations. A farm report, then talk about interest rates. Rates. At the office, I lasted until 10 o'clock before my hands started to shake. I told my assistant I needed to step out and drove straight to Davenport Community Credit Union. The same parking lot, same squeaky door. Susan, the teller, smiled like she always did. "Morning, Mark. What can I help you with?" "I need to look at my accounts," I said. She pulled them up without fuss. Checking, savings, auto debits. And there it was, the cruise payment, all in my name. Scheduled, paid, quietly obedient. I sat in my truck afterward with the printouts on my lap, staring at the numbers until they stopped feeling like accusations and started feeling like information. Cold. Useful. That night, instead of going home, I went to the VFW on West 3rd Street. The lights were low. The air smelled like fried onions and old stories. Walt Prendergast slid onto the stool next to me without asking. "You look like hell," he said. "Feel worse," I answered. I told him enough. Not everything. He took a sip of his beer and nodded once. "People don't change," he said. "They just get more honest when they think they've won." On the way home, that sentence stuck. I opened the filing cabinet in the spare room. Inside were years of receipts, braces, car repairs, tuition deposits, things I'd never asked credit for. Then I found something newer, small transfers, regular. Linda moving money into an account with Emily's name on it. Not illegal, not dramatic, just hidden. I laughed once. Short, surprised, not anger, clarity. The next morning I called the cruise line. "Reason for cancellation?" the woman asked. "I'm no longer a passenger," I said. "In more ways than one?" She processed it without comment. That afternoon I called a realtor. 2 days later, we walked through the house. "Your wife knows?" she asked carefully. "She's traveling," I said. "I'll handle it." The offer came fast. A young couple, first baby, pre-approved loan. "Tell them yes," I said. When Linda came back, she didn't recognize the house at first. That's what the realtor told me later. Different car, different planter, different lock. She laughed at first. Then she tried the key. Then she called my name. Then the police came. The officer asked one question. "Whose name is on the deed?" There was a pause. That was when it landed. I answered Linda's call from a diner outside Muscatine. "What did you do?" she demanded. "I sold the house," I said. "You can't do that." "It was my house," I said. "You just lived in it." Emily came on the line after. "I didn't think you'd really do it." "I didn't think you'd really mean what you said," I replied. Months later, Emily asked to talk. We met for coffee. "I didn't know what it cost you," she said. "That's the thing about costs," I replied. "You don't feel them when someone else is paying." We hugged, awkward, brief. It wasn't a happy ending. It was an honest one. I live alone now. Small place, folding chair by the river, AM radio that only works if you turn the dial just right. I sleep better, not longer, deeper. What I learned, what took me 14 years and one quiet text to understand is this. Love without respect is just labor, and silence when chosen can be strength. If you've ever been quietly erased, told you belonged right up until you didn't, you're not alone. Sometimes justice doesn't shout. Sometimes it signs papers, packs the truck, and keeps going.